A subscriber recently left this comment on one of my videos. Do you think you can do a tutorial on keys? I'm really struggling to understand that part of music theory, and it would be great if you could help with that. So what is a key in music theory? What does the key of C mean, or the key of E? Being in a key is a really important concept to understand when you're learning music. If there's any other concepts in music you find confusing, or perhaps a word or a phrase you've heard and you're not sure what it means, and you want me to answer or perhaps create a future video on, then please ask me in the comments below. If you're new here, this channel's your guide through developing all the different skills and knowledge you need to become a better piano player and musician. So if that's something you want to do, consider clicking the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on anything you need to learn. So a key tells you what scale is being used as the basis to create the music. There's really two parts to the name: which note to start the scale from, and then which type of scale to start from that note. For example, the key of C major means you're using the notes from the C major scale for that piece of music. When we use the phrase "in the key of," we really mean either major or minor, which are two different types of scale, the most common two you're going to come across. There's 12 different notes on the piano, and you can start a major scale from any of those 12 notes, giving you 12 different keys. And you can start a minor scale from any of those 12 as well. A scale is just a group of notes that we can use to create music with, like a colour palette you'd use to paint a picture. Most of the time, we don't just use all 12 notes, we have organised groups of notes that we know work well together. So major and minor scales are 7 out of those 12, but not the same 7, and each has a specific pattern or spacing between the notes. These different patterns give the scales very different sounds, like different colour palettes we could play with. They're made up of something we call intervals, which are the names for the different sized gaps or spacings between notes. They're really the fundamental building blocks for scales and harmony and melody. So after this, I really recommend watching this video to learn all about intervals properly and how to name them. We use them to describe lots of other things in music, so they're really helpful to learn. I haven't covered minor yet, but this major scale video will explain exactly how to build and understand the major scale pattern using intervals. So in the key of E major means using the E major scale for the music. In the key of F minor means using the F minor scale for the music. But sometimes people don't specify and they just say in the key of D. Usually that means they're talking about major, and that's the same when people talk about chords as well. It's just worth mentioning too that there's actually some common variations of the minor scale. They can also fluctuate mid-song, so in the key of something minor could mean any one of these or a changing mix. You don't need to learn these straight away, it's just good to know that they exist and that being in a minor key could also mean that. Once you have your key, let's use G major as an example. I said you use the notes from that scale to create the music. That means that you can create all your melodies and harmony from the notes of that scale, ignoring the other notes that aren't in it. So for G major, we start on G, and that's all the white notes apart from F, where we use F sharp instead. Using F natural, the white one, would mean that we're no longer following the major scale pattern that we started from G, and it would sound different. So with those notes, we can do anything we want. We can go up and down, leap around, create any pattern, or play whatever has been written for us to play, locking inside this group of notes. Remember, these notes also repeat up and down the piano, so you're not just restricted to this octave here. If you create a bit of music in a major key, it's going to have a signature major sound to it. Likewise, if you create a piece of music in a minor key, it will have a signature minor sound to it. Although sometimes it can be a bit ambiguous, but I'll talk about that more later on. Just quickly, if you're finding this video helpful, could you please give the video a like and let me know in the comments, as those things are really helpful for channels. So the first note of the scale, the note that the scale is named after, is really important. In this case, that's G. We often call it the root or the tonic, and when you're in the key of G, we can say that the note G is the tonal center of the music. What that really means is that G will sound like home, sound resolved and sound at rest to our ears. Ending on a G makes something sound finished, like this. That sounds complete. Whereas if I ended on a different note, it's going to sound like it's unfinished. Hanging on that note sounds like it's unfinished and it's leading our ears somewhere else. So when we say we're in the key of G major, having it sound like it could finish on the note G is a really important part of what that means. I said harmony as well, so that means all your chords come from the notes of this scale too. If I play these triads, these chords with 3 notes in, playing every other note of the scale, I can just move that pattern up through the scale, but when I'm about to pass the F, I need to make sure I lock in the scale and use F sharp. And if I keep going, every time one of these notes is about to cross the F, make sure to hit F sharp. So this chord here, for example, is not in the key of G major because it has a note in it that's not in the G major scale. We also number these notes of the scale, so a chord that starts from the first note is called chord 1, a chord that starts from the third note is chord 3, and that's actually a really useful and important thing to learn. I'll cover that in depth in another video soon. But just like this note G, which is the first note of the scale, the root, sounded final in the key of G major, so does chord number 1, which in this case would be a G major chord. Chord number 1 in a major key is always a major chord. So if I play a chord progression and finish it on G, it will sound complete. Now, just because you're in the key of G for a piece, that doesn't mean that you absolutely have to always stick inside it all the time. The scale is a set, organised group of sounds, but sometimes you want to experiment with other flavours too. If you play something inside the key, the word for that is diatonic, and if you go outside, that's called non-diatonic. You can completely change keys mid-song, you can change key for a section and then come back to where you started. You can just go out the key temporarily with a passing chord that doesn't completely fit the scale. As long as it sounds good, there's no rules that you have to stick in the scale. Going out the key can sometimes just give us more creative options. A melody could go out the key too, sometimes to really make a change, but also sometimes to just add a bit of tension, a bit of extra flavour to make things interesting as a passing note in between the main notes of the scale. Every major scale has what's called a relative minor scale. I'm going to cover this soon in another video so you can understand it fully, but the quick version in relation to keys is that for every major scale, there's also a minor scale that has exactly the same notes. In exactly the same order, they just loop around and round, but now there's a new starting note, a different note out of those 7 that sounds like home. The best example to learn this is with C major and A minor. Both scales are all the white notes and no black keys, which makes it easier to visualize. C major runs from C to C, where any C will sound like home, and A minor runs from A to A, where any A will sound like home. Remember I said there's a few variations of minor scales. Only one of them though uses the exact same 7 notes as the relative major, so that's the one I'm talking about at the moment. This one is called the natural minor, although once you're in it, then remember it can change to one of the other ones. Either way, you'd still say I'm in the key of A minor, for example. So these are the 7 notes of the C major scale, and if I take the top 2 off, A and B, and I just put them at the beginning, you can see it's the same notes, just in a different order. Now this note A is the start, and we hear everything else relative to this new home note, which has a big impact on the sound. So using some of these notes, I can make C sound like home. So that's in the key of C major. Or I can make A sound like home, then we're in the key of A minor. In the key of C major, the C major chord would be the home chord. In the key of A minor, the A minor chord would be the home chord. Sometimes in a piece of music, it's really obvious where it sounds like home, like the A or the C in this example. But sometimes music can be a bit more ambiguous, and at points it may sound more major, and at other times it may sound more minor. So although they are technically different keys, in a way it's kind of like they are the same key. Just to let you know before one last topic, I have links down below in the description for lots of other useful and important beginner theory and practical videos you should check out after this. And lastly then, for readers, we have key signatures which tell you what key we're in by showing you how many and which sharps or flats are in the scale. When you follow the notes going up and down on the sheet music, you're going up and down but locking into that scale you're meant to be using. So back in G major, if you're on the note E and the music tells you to go up a second to the next note in the scale, you're not going to go up to the F, you're going to go up to the F sharp, because that's the next note in the scale. The key signature tells you to change every F to F sharp. So as I said, every major scale has what's called a relative minor scale, which contains the same notes, just starting at a different point in the sequence. That means that when you see a key signature, it could actually be either the major or the relative minor, and you can't tell just from looking at the key signature. You need more information from the score or from listening to it. But either way, it still gives you enough information to play all the correct notes. And then if it changes to one of the other types of minor scale, you keep the same key signature, but you just put in extra flats, sharps, or naturals on each of the individual notes that you're changing. If you're new to piano, you'll probably get something from this video next, giving you 4 reasons to learn scales. Knowing what to focus on when practicing them will help you get a lot more out of them. Please leave a like and let me know in the comments if you got something out of this video, as that's really helpful, and subscribe for more content to help you develop your piano playing. Thanks for watching.